Trump has an enormous capability. He's irreverent to received wisdom, to traditional thinking. He says, well, let's look at it again, and sometimes he can surprise you. I'll tell you, I had conversations with him when he cuts to the chase on something, and he says something that no one before said. A lot of people felt in their gut, but they didn't have the guts to say it out loud. And he does.
Prime Minister, what do you say to the critics who say, Israel owns America, Israel is who makes America do things they want him to do, whether it's through AIPAC, whether it's through, funding, money. You'll typically hear this. This has been overly said the last couple of years in a major way. And there's a community of Americans that at this point believe that whatever Israel wants, they make a phone call to America. America better do or else. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely not. I think it's full of hokum. First of all, do you know President Trump? I mean, sort of, I've known him for many years.
Sure.
Okay. You don't make him do anything. He does what he thinks is in America's interests, and he's very forceful about it. When he sees allies who don't step up to the plate, he's not shy about saying it. And we have a different relationship altogether. It's not one of coercion or manipulation. It's one of common interests and common values. And I think that people understand that, because Israel is different. It really is. We know that we have to fight for ourselves, and we do. But when we fight for ourselves, we fight for you too, because we fight Iran. Iran tried to murder President Trump not once, but twice. Iran killed and wounded thousands of Americans with their IEDs, explosive devices, in Iraq and Afghanistan. Iran killed 241 Marines in Beirut. They bomb your embassies. They burn American flags. They have mobs chanting, "Death to America, death to America." So when we fight Iran, we're not just fighting our war, we're fighting your war. But we are fighting that war here in the Middle East. And let me tell you what would happen. And as someone who had been in the Middle East as a child, I think you can appreciate this. It's not only we who are threatened by Iran, it's our Arab neighbors too. They know that Iran wants to conquer them, pillage their oil fields, take over the Middle East, the maritime routes that control world trade. So they know that. But if you look at who's actually fighting Iran, it's Israel. It's Israel, our brave soldiers, our incredibly brave soldiers. And this tiny country, President Trump asked me, how do you guys do this? I mean, you're such a small country, we're the size of New Jersey, bigger than Rhode Island, but that's it. We're slightly smaller than New Jersey, and we take on this enormous empire with all its proxies, this anti-American empire that threatens to kill the president and chants death to America. How do you do this? And I said, well, you're like an enormous lion, almost like a prehistoric saber-toothed tiger. You're enormous. We're not, but we are, we're the badger, this little animal.
Absolutely.
Badger. And you see a badger being, some tiger or lioness is trying to kill it, and it sort of turns around. It has very sharp teeth, and it knows how to go to the weakness points, to the points of vulnerability of the enemy. And you see these things. I watch NGO Wild when my wife lets me, because she likes to watch cooking shows. Okay. So late at night, after we have this argument, we settle on some compromise. And on Nat Geo Wild, I see these films of this badger, this tiny creature, it's about this big, taking on a lion, and the lion runs away. So Israel is the badger of the international scene. It has the fortitude, the will to fight our enemies because of our history, because for so long we didn't have a state, we didn't have an army, we didn't have the ability to defend ourselves, which culminated in this crescendo of massacres that culminated in the worst massacre of them all, the Holocaust, in which a third of our people were annihilated. We have that in our bones, in our hearts, in our soul, and we fight. And that's I think President Trump would like to see more Israels around the globe, because, everybody who says, America first, I can respect that, but I don't think they want America alone. And if you can have allies that actually share your values and fight for them in various parts of the world, and especially in the Middle East with Iran trying to take over the world, I think that's a valuable addition. So It'll take time for this to sink in, but it will sink in.
Do you think President Trump is a type of a man that you can get anything you want and make him do what he wants? I don't think President Trump is. But I do think Biden and others are. So the whole criticism of the fact that Israel, whatever they want, they can call America and have favors being done, I would agree with you on Trump, but with Biden. So maybe a question that I don't think has been asked yet. Putin was asked 2 weeks ago if the war between Ukraine and Russia would have happened under Trump. He said, no, it wouldn't have happened. So for you, would the war and the Hamas attack have happened if President Trump was president instead of Biden?
I don't know. It's a good question, but you said something about Biden that I should just point out the facts. In fact, President Biden supported us in the beginning of the war after this horrific massacre, and he came here, and I very much appreciate it. But as the war progressed and the vilifications of Israel, the distortions on the media began to pile on, he began to take a different course. And when we were just 2/3 of the way, 3/4 of the way in Gaza, I said we have to go into that last position that they had where they had organized battalions. It's in a city called Rafah in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. And he said, don't go there. And he said, if you do go there, I'll smack an embargo on you. Now, you're fighting a 7-front war, and all of a sudden you're slapped with an embargo of weapons. That was tough. And I said to President Biden, who I've known for many years, I respect the fact you're the president of the United States, but I'm the prime minister of the one and only Jewish state, and we've been fighting to survive in our small place under the sun. It's been a battle that has been going on for 3,500 years. So I'll have to do what we have to do. And then a few days later, Tony Blinken, who was the Secretary of State, came to Israel, and he said, the president is serious about this embargo. And I said, Tony, I know it's serious because you stopped all the weapons. You slow walked them before, but now you've stopped them. And then I said to him this. He said, well, how are you going to do it then? I said, Tony, we'll fight with our fingernails if we have to, but we're not going to leave. It's like the Allies would leave a quarter of the German battalions in place and not go into Berlin. And I said, would you take that? Would you take that, Patrick? Of course you wouldn't. So we didn't take it either. We did it against the opposition of the American president. So much for Israel controlling the United States. We don't. But we do seek to control our destiny. And when somebody commits a crime like they did on October 7th, decapitating our men, raping our women and then murdering them, burning children alive in front of their parents, taking 255 hostages, grandmothers with their grandchildren, this horror, and pledge to do it again and again and again. Well, what choice do we have? We have to fight them and their Iranian patrons, and we did just that. We did that first with American help, then with American opposition, and when President Trump came in, with great American help, which I truly appreciate. And I think President Trump does what he thinks is good for America. I don't think that. I know that for a fact. He's a great leader. So
going back to that, I want to clarify this again. So you said you don't know whether Hamas October 7 attack would have happened under Trump. So you're saying Hamas would have had the audacity, even under Trump, to have attacked, or no, they would have feared him?
Probably not, but it's hard to say with these maniacs. You can't quite tell. I think Iran would have been more careful, and Iran is the patron. Would they have controlled completely their client, their proxy? Maybe not. Maybe they would have, possibly. But look, I think President Trump has changed the posture of America. America is back on the global scene. America is resumed its powerful position among the nations. And I think that's for the good. Because I think one of the tragedies for the Jewish people was that in the first half of the 20th century, America was not the dominant global power. And the worst tragedy in the history of mankind, the World War II, took place, and I don't think it was accidental. And the worst tragedy in the history of my people, the Holocaust, took place. But in the second half of the 20th century, America emerged as the dominant power on the earth, and Israel came into being. And as a result, our history has changed. We no longer are massacred with impunity. We now have the ability to defend ourselves, and we are very fortunate to have an ally, a strong ally, the United States, with successive presidents. We've had our differences, as I said, but overall there's been a very strong alliance through all presidents. But it's never been stronger. It's never been so intimate and so powerful as it is now under President Trump.
You've been prime minister while President Clinton was in the White House, Biden, Obama, and Trump twice. Is there an element of unpredictability with President Trump that you don't know necessarily what he's going to be saying next? Or do you notice a pattern of, similar approaches that they all take?
Well, look, I think President Trump has an enormous capability. He's irreverent to received wisdom, to traditional thinking. He says, well, let's look at it again, And sometimes he can surprise you. I'll tell you, I had conversations with him when he cuts to the chase on something, and he says something that no one before said. A lot of people felt in their gut, but they didn't have the guts to say it out loud. And he does. And I find that very refreshing. And also, I think that unpredictability is not a bad thing to have. Not a bad thing to have with sometimes with your allies, and certainly with your enemies.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Dejobnik signing off.